I don't know how long I was on the screen, but not as much as any of the Bond girls today. The roles are better for women in general. I mean, not only in the Bond pictures.
It had never even come into my kind of consciousness that it might ever be a woman. I then had to think about actually how I was going to play this. But it was wonderfully written, GoldenEye. Wonderfully written. I mean, she asserted herself straight away over James Bond, and their relationship was very well mapped out.
So how does it feel to be a Bond girl? Or a Bond woman?
Oh no, keep it a Bond girl, goodness. I don't want to be called, I think a Bond woman, I think a Bond girl's sexier, isn't it?
Welcome back to Crawford-Clark Close-Up. Following the release of the latest Bond outing and Daniel Craig's last, No Time to Die, we've been totting up our rankings of various key elements that have made the James Bond series of films and novels so successful over the last 7 decades. Yes, it's 60 years since the first official screen 007, Sean Connery, in Dr. No in 1962, and 70 years this year since the release of Fleming's first spy novel to end all spy novels, Casino Royale. In this video, we're taking a look at one of the fundamental attributes of the screen Bond, the accompanying Bond women. From the sacrificial lambs like Skyfall's Severine or The Man with the Golden Gun's Andrea, to the hapless Mary Goodnight, to those who define Bond as a character, Teresa and Vesper. The women of the Bond series are so integral that Mariam Darboe, Cara Milovi from 1987's The Living Daylights even wrote a book and a TV show called Bond Girls Are Forever, originally released to celebrate the 40th anniversary in 2002. In this video, we'll be taking a look at our 007 favourite women to have taken Bond's arm to join him on one of his adventures. We'll also take a look at our honourable and dishonourable mentions that didn't make the cut. Before we get started, remember that this list is subjective and purely my own preference. Be sure to comment below with your thoughts and favourites. With that out of the way, let's get started. The first of our dishonourable mentions goes to Tiffany Case. When we first see her in Diamonds, there's some mystery about her as she's sizing Bond up for this assignment, but as soon as we get into the third act, she becomes a shell of the interesting character she began as: brash, inept, and just hugely disappointing. Actress Jill St. John clearly relished playing the role, however, as she appreciates the fan mail she receives for Bond to this day, which equates to more than all her other filmography put together. Next up, we have Britt Ekland as the completely useless Mary Goodnight in The Man with the Golden Gun. She shows promise by not immediately jumping into the sack with Bond on the mission, despite clearly being interested in him, and at one point gives as good as she gets, before abandoning her hard-to-get routine to portray a bimbo for the remainder of the runtime. Pleasing on the eye, but one of the least memorable of the Bond ladies. Next up is the late Tanya Roberts, who portrayed Stacey Sutton in A View to a Kill. Again, the character first appears with Zorin at his stud farm, and there's some intrigue into how she'll fit into the story. But as soon as Bond enters the picture and makes his way to her home, things go south quickly. The biggest issue is that given Moore's age, 57 at the time of filming, Roberts was more than 20 years his junior, and there's absolutely zero chemistry between the two, even when they share a cheeky shower to wrap up Moore's Bond era. Our final dishonourable mention falls to Jacinta Johnson, otherwise known as Jinx, played by Halle Berry in Die Another Day. One of the biggest names of the time to play an official Bond leading lady, Berry acquits herself well to the role, but the screenplay is so hammy and really lets her down. She and Brosnan have solid chemistry on screen together, but the character just gets annoying the more we see of her. Onto the honourable mentions, and missing out on the top 007 firstly is Miss Universe runner-up 1960 Daniela Bianchi, who played the exotic Tatiana Romanova, a pawn in Spector's schemes in From Russia with Love. The scene in which she and Bond meet in the bedroom of his hotel room is still a tentpole audition scene to this day to showcase how well the new prospective Bond actor can tackle the love scenes. Pussy Galore next, one of the series' more risque character names, and particularly startling as this was only 3 movies in Goldfinger. Honor Blackman and Connery have great chemistry together on screen, and the sexuality of the character is also played out well. The late Blackman relished the chance to play a bitch or a toughie instead of a goody two-shoes, despite Galore changing her allegiance for the film's 3rd act. The beautiful Barbara Bach as Major Anya Amasova in The Spy Who Loved Me was the first time in the series that the Bond woman was showcased as an equal in skills to Bond. She and Moore have a genuine spark on screen together, and she even manages to touch one of Bond's nerves by referring to his doomed marriage to Tracy in a nice bit of continuity across different Bond actors. Our final 2 honourable mentions before we get to the main list are more modern Bond girls, independent, strong-willed women who can give Bond a run for his money. The first being Michelle Yeoh's kick-ass Wei Lin from Tomorrow Never Dies. Whilst there's never really any chemistry on screen between she and Brosnan's Bond, she's still an entertaining presence in the film and plays a pivotal role in the film's finale aboard the stealth boat. Finally, we have the beautiful Olga Kurilenko as Camille Montez in Quantum of Solace, a woman on a mission, much like Bond himself. There's no dalliances to be had between Bond and Camille, which alone makes her one of the more unique of the Bond women in the canon. Kicking off our Bond women list proper at number 7, we have the very first main Bond girl. After being seduced by Sylvia Trench at his home playing with his golf balls, it's not until over an hour into the premiere Bond movie that we meet Ursula Andress's voluptuous Honey Rider emerging from the waves in Jamaica. If this ranking was going on star power and looks alone, Ursula Andress's Rider would probably be at the top of the pile. As it is, she proves a worthy, if not necessarily world-wise character who joins up with Bond before they're both captured and taken to Dr. No, before she's in a position of Bond having to rescue her. She's certainly strong-willed, telling a clearly uncomfortable yet impressed 007 that she set a Black Widow spider on her rapist, which took him a whole week to die. Though initially reluctant to take on the role, having read the screenplay and felt that it was all a bit nonsense, Andress now remarks how Honey Rider introduced the concept of a new kind of woman, athletic, sportive, and it made an impression, I should say. At 6, we turn to one of the series' more enigmatic Bond ladies, the once again stunning Carol Bouquet as Melina Havelock. When Bond meets her, she's wielding a crossbow, out for revenge for the death of her parents, and she's a hard woman to break down. Moore was advancing in years by the release of For Your Eyes Only, yet the chemistry between the two remains solid throughout. Kicking off the top 5, well, let's just hear from Lois Chiles herself.
I mean, first of all, the name, Dr. Holly Goodhead. But how am I going to explain that one to my parents?
Yes, alongside Pussy Galore, it's certainly the most memorable Bond leading lady name in the series, and the insinuation of the name is certainly detrimental when you think of how strong and feminist the character actually is. But Chiles gives as good as she gets from the moment she meets Moore's Bond, who's surprised that she's a woman. Goodhead is there in the finale on the space station, and she aids Bond in literally saving the world. Charles has since confessed that she hated the wire sequence when she and Bond are orbiting in space, as it was, quote, the most uncomfortable sequence to film. But whether you find the last line about taking her around the world one more time cheesy or not, you can't deny it's pure Moore Bond. In 4th place, we come to Brosnan's first lead in GoldenEye, Isabella Skrupko's Natalia Simonova. She's certainly a 90s woman, resourceful, sexy, despite the pretty terrible costume choice for much of the film, and she assists Bond competently throughout the mission. Our top 3 begins with Carrie Lowell's Pam Bouvier from License to Kill. First glimpsed by Bond post-titles in Leiter's study on his wedding day, Bond grows suspicious of Bouvier and how connected she is with Sanchez and Heller's organisation, before realising her true allegiance. She's truly one of the most beautiful Bond girls in the series, and she's a huge asset to Dalton's Bond throughout the film. Our top 2 Bond leading ladies are tragic characters, both having played such a fundamental part in making Bond the flawed hero he is, incapable of quitting the service and settling down. Just missing out on the top spot is Casino Royale's Vesper Lind, played by the breathtakingly beautiful Ava Green. Her chemistry with Craig's Bond is probably unmatched in the series, and she lights up the screen from their meet on the train to Montenegro. As Green astutely reflects, at the beginning of the book she's quite passive, very enigmatic. In the script, she's very quick-witted, always has the right words. She's enough for Bond to tender his resignation from the Secret Service to sail around the world with, until the heartbreaking finale where, despite her betrayal, Bond tries to save her from drowning herself. It's a haunting moment acted superbly by both Green and Craig, and the character leaves such a mark on Craig's iteration of Bond, as well, of course, as the literary 007. So, number one should be little surprise to anyone. For depth of character and for incredible screen presence, it's Diana Rigg's ill-fated Tracy Teresa Di Vincenzo from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Whatever misgivings you may have about Lazenby's solo outing as Bond, his chemistry with Rigg in this film is fantastic to watch. Bond rescues Tracy from the waves at the start of the film, and in the second act, it's Tracy who rescues a clearly frightened for his life Bond when he escapes Piz Gloria. The proposal in the barn is one of the most beautiful moments in the series, but a moment you know is too satisfying to last. Bond can't marry. He can't live a happy life. He's as much a fated figure as his new bride. For those unconvinced by Lazenby's acting in the film, watch the final scene again where Bond cradles Tracy in the car and proclaims, "We have all the time in the world." It's a nuanced, authentic piece of acting. Tracy is troubled and unpredictable from the outset, and therein lies Bond's attraction to her. He drives off, anticipating children and a happy family, for all his hopes to be stripped from him moments later. Tracy remains the ultimate Bond girl. So there you have our personal picks for the best of the Bond girls. Let us know what you make of our choices and leave your own picks in the comments below. Come and find Crawford-Clark Close-Up on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. You can find us on the movie app Letterboxd, search CC Close-Up, and you can drop us an email with suggestions for channel videos to crawfordclarkcloseup@gmail.com. For the last words, we'll leave it to three of the Bond girls themselves.
I'm starting to realise that once Bond's entered your life, it doesn't really leave it.
It is the international calling card. If you've been in a Bond movie, you go wherever, and they know you.
And there's only an elite few who have gotten to do it, you know, and I'm extremely proud and very honored, you know, to be a part of a very elite group of beautiful, sexy, talented, smart women.
Thanks for watching, and until next time, that's a wrap.